from the CyberHub bunker and studio. You're tuning in to the CyberHub podcast. And now for your host and CISO, James Azar.
All right, folks, good morning. Happy January 20th. It's Wednesday. We've got a loaded show for you today. If it's your first time tuning in for the live Practitioner Brief, we are live on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. You can tune in, watch us live every single morning, 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. This will also be on your favorite podcast listening platform at a later time, essentially just an hour from now. We'll be posting it on all of our podcast listening platforms so you can listen to it. So if you're listening, please make sure to subscribe. And if you're watching, please subscribe, comment, like, say hello, good morning. Enjoy today with me as I give you the latest of what's going on from the desk of the CISO. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at KnowBe4 and Wistic. Thank you for your support. You can check out a lot of their great services and products below in the link if you're watching. So before we get into today's show, I want to do my ceremonial coffee because I've got 5 things to talk about today. Five. Yes. 5 full things we're going to talk about today. If you're listening to us at a later date, if you watch us live, you get to see all the stories and who they're by and what I'm talking about. But I am going to take a sip of my double espresso. I hope you will join me in a ceremonial cup of coffee, kind of a Scott Adams thing, but I really like it. So I'm all for it. And plus, I drink so much coffee, I need it. All right, here's the deal. You've subscribed, you're followed. Good morning, commenting. Thank you so much for everyone tuning in. Let's get right into what's going on today. So we've got a lot to cover. So let's start with this DNSpooq flaw that allows DNS hijackings for millions and millions of devices. This is by Lindsay O'Donnell over at the Threat Post. So 7 flaws in open source software DNS mask could allow DNS cache poisoning attacks and remote code execution. Researchers have uncovered a set of flaws in the DNS mask, the popular open source software used for caching domain name system responses for home and commercial routers and servers. The set of 7 flaws are compromised to buffer overflow issues and flaws allowing for DNS cache poisoning attacks, also known as DNS spoofing. If exploited, these flaws could be chained together to allow for remote code execution, denial of service, and other attacks. This is a significant flaw. It's got several CVEs, so let's talk about them. There's about I think 7 different CVEs here from what I saw, so let's go over them. 3 of the flaws, which is CVE 2022-5686, 25684, and 25685, could enable DNS cache poisoning, which is a type of attack that enables DNS queries to be subverted. So in a real-world situation, essentially, an attacker here could use unsolicited DNS responses to poison the DNS cache and convince unknowing internet browsers to a specially crafted attacker-owned website and then redirect them to malicious servers. Obviously, from there, the chain of attack goes through. There's also a buffer overflow vulnerability that's CVE 2022-5687, 25683, 25682, and 25681 in DNS mask. The memory corruption flaw can be triggered by a remote attacker using crafted DNS responses. The attack can lead to a denial of service, information exposure, and potential remote code execution. This impact could be significant as this could allow for a multi-staged attack in your environment. So it's kind of critical that if you're combining, and again, in this example, the researchers are saying like, hey, if you combine several of these CVEs, you can really do some impact. You can really do some damage. So time to get together with your team, time to start looking at how you defend over this. There are some updates and some controls you can put in place. Again, the CIS Top 20, I'm a big fan. You can put in specific controls here and really mitigate this damage. So what would be a day in January if I didn't say the word SolarWinds? What would it mean to you? Nothing or everything? SolarWinds, back in the headlines, 2 stories. Let's go over this. So Malwarebytes now says that they were targeted by the SolarWinds hackers. So Malwarebytes doesn't use SolarWinds, but they've been told by Microsoft that through the vulnerabilities within Microsoft Some of the attackers were able to access Malwarebytes' email system and compromise their internal email system as well. Marcin Klasinski, who's the CEO and co-founder of Malwarebytes, said that after an extensive investigation, we determined the attacker only gained access to a limited subset of internal company emails. We found no evidence of unauthorized access or compromised to any of their products, which is obviously a very positive thing. Malwarebytes isn't really relying on Microsoft. It seems like they're only using it from an internal kind of communication method, meaning to use Microsoft 365. But we know that the attackers in SolarWinds were able to access that and go through it. And so you bet your sweet tails that there are going to be more of these news coming through as well. So FireEye has also, sticking to SolarWinds, FireEye has released a new open source tool in response to SolarWinds hacks. This is by Edward Kovacs over at Security Weekly. So FireEye yesterday announced the release of an open source tool designed to check Microsoft 365 tenants for the use of techniques associated with UNC 2452, the name currently assigned to the cybersecurity firm by the cybersecurity firm to the threat group that attacked SolarWinds. Obviously, they're still looking for attribution, but they've named him UNC 2452. The open source tool would check for four main techniques that were used: the theft of Active Directory Federation services and token signing certificates for authentication to targeted user accounts, creating Azure Active Directory backdoors, obtaining credentials for high-privileged on-premise accounts, synchronized with Microsoft 365, and abusing existing 365 applications to gain access to valuable data. The new tool by Mandiant is called Azure AD Investigator, and you guys can go and check that out as well. Let's continue moving. Again, a lot of stuff going on today. So this is by Ionat Arkhire from Security Week as well. So the VPNFilter malware, something I spoke about extensively last year, is still present in hundreds of networks, and malicious actors are taking control of infected devices. This according to research by Trend Micro. So believed to be operated by the Russian threat group Sofisy, with possible involvement from Sandworm, VPNFilter emerged as a major threat right from the start. 50 impacted device models, the potential to compromise critical infrastructure, and approximately 500,000 bots observed across 54 different countries. There's still people who haven't patched and addressed this vulnerability yet. According to the Trend Micro report, there's 5,447 unique devices that are still connecting to the domain, meaning they are still infected and need to be addressed. If that is something within your organization or within one of your suppliers, you may want to get that addressed immediately. And finally, we'll end today on a note where we talk a little bit about the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party, and a Chinese hacking group that's stealing airline passenger data in order to track high value movement of people. So I want you to think of it like this. These guys are hacking airline data to see where executives are traveling from specific organizations to kind of understand what they are up to, and as well as spy on them in some of the countries where some executives travel to. It is not like the US. There are things in place that really deal with that. So the data that's used is for credential stuffing or password spraying attacks against a target's employee service, such as email accounts. They're targeting people of interest. Past examples include Chinese group APT41, which targeted telcos with special malware capable of stealing SMS messages. This was part of China's effort to track the Uyghur Muslim minority that's now being targeted in camps in China. And so a lot more of that. China remains to be a critical threat actor as well as the Russians in cybersecurity, and something we definitely need to address over a period of time. And hopefully the new administration that's going to be sworn in a few hours will start to address that. It seems like they're making some really positive headway from a cybersecurity perspective, and hopefully Congress and Senate can come through with several of the bills that have been pending. If you go back to our CISO Talk podcast, catch an episode I did in December with my good friend Patrick Gall from the NTSC. We talked a little bit about the stuff that's on the table for the new Congress and new Senate. That's it for our practitioner brief here today, folks. Thanks so much for listening. Thanks so much for tuning in. For all of those watching us live, thank you again for your comments, your likes, your loves. I appreciate it. We'll be back tomorrow to wrap up this week and so much more. Until then, folks, stay healthy and stay cyber safe.
We love feedback, so make sure to connect with us on social media and subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast listening platform.